Hello, everybody. Today I have my friend Paul, who I've known for quite a few years. Now, Paul has a story, and it's a sad story, but I feel it should be told. Um, and it's about his father. So I'm going to pass you over to my friend. And can you tell us a little bit about your family story and how it's changed your life and your mom's and your brothers?
Sure. My grandparents on my father's side, they were European immigrants. They came here from Slovakia right before World War One because they knew what was getting ready to happen in Europe, and the family was like, "You need to come over here." And so my dad, his brothers and sisters, they're all first generation American. Um, his brother got drafted into the army and wrote home and said to his youngest, my dad, who was the youngest, he told him, he said, "You don't want to get drafted into the army. Go enlist in the Air Force." So my dad enlisted in the Air Force. He was 2 years out of high school, a small town in Massachusetts. Really not, they didn't have money for college. None of the other kids went to college. And so, he enlisted in the Air Force. And during basic training, apparently he was like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, you're kind of smart. Here, do this. Here, try this. Do you want to go to officer candidate school?" Sure. Made it through officer candidate school. What do you want to do? I don't know. Do you want to fly? Sure. So they taught him how to fly. And that was his calling. He was a very gifted pilot. He was a very gifted pilot. And his deployment took him to Japan, took him stateside. He was over in England, and that's when he met my mother. And you know, they ended up. He was flying F-100s at the time, which was the first supersonic fighter. And then he got transferred back stateside, back to Las Vegas, and they got married and had my brother. And then 2 years later, I came along, and we were in Las Vegas. He was learning to fly what was new then, the F-105, and brief jaunt to Virginia. We came back. The Vietnam War was ramping up, and he was twice he'd been an instructor pilot. And he told my mom, he's like, I need to go. I need to fly combat. I mean, I'm sending people over there with not as much experience as I do. And so we ended up in Okinawa, and he was stationed at Kadena, and he was there for a year. And apparently it really bothered him that he'd see all of his squadron mates, and they've got check marks next to the missions, and his was a big zero. We were there for we were in Kadena for a year. He was ferrying planes back and forth, and then got stationed in Karat late December of 1967, and started flying missions. And he flew because we weren't fighting over Laos. Those missions were non-counters, which, politicians are so full of crap because, okay, you're going to put yourself in harm's way, but because we're not supposed to be there, that mission is not going to count towards your 100. And the
Oh, really?
rule, oh yeah, oh yeah. So you're getting shot at, and flying a jet's dangerous business, and this doesn't count towards the 100 missions that the pilots were required to fly for their tour, and then they would go home, get transferred home. But yeah, so we had three non-counters, and also the politicians at the time. It was a case of, okay, you can't bomb this, you can't bomb that, you can't bomb this, you can't bomb that. They were building SAM sites, surface to air missile sites. They were building AAA batteries, and no, it's not operational yet, so you can't take it out, not until it can shoot at you, then you can shoot back. And yeah, exactly. And that sort of crap is still going on today. I know a few army guys that I had a buddy of mine tell me, he goes, "Paul," he was talking about his third deployment to Iraq. He's combat wounded. He tells me, he goes, "Paul, we can't even fire a warning shot without there being an inquiry." And I'm like, "A warning shot?" He goes, "Yeah, we have to fire a warning shot." You know, can you imagine if we had fought World War II with those same constraints? We would have lost,
Yeah.
and Europe would be speaking German. So anyway, he flew March 31st, 1968, strapped into his Thud. That's what the plane was called, the Thunderchief. Pilots called it the Thud. And he strapped into plane 600409. That was the serial number, and flew a routine mission in Route Pack 1, which the targets in Vietnam, they were divided up. Route Pack 1 was just over the DMZ, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 was around Hanoi, and those were the most heavily defended. So it was relatively, I mean, if any mission is relatively easy, but just, they dropped their bombs, and there was a forward air controller that told them, gave them an order to go strafe this island called Tiger Island right off the DMZ. And I've talked to other pilots, and they said, we had no business going anywhere near that place. It held no strategic value. It was full of guns. We gave it a wide berth. So why, you're gonna? I still to this day cannot fathom that. But his plane was hit, and he bailed out. He radioed to his wingman. He said, "I'm hit," and the official report said his voice sounded a little strained. Perhaps he was hit, probably hit personal. The flight leader of the second element, because there was a 4-flight ship, and the flight leader of the second element, Captain Joe Seckler, who I've spoke to at depth, he he's told me, he goes, I saw a good parachute, but when he hit the water, I lost him because the wings were so small, it had the turning radius of a diesel truck. And he goes, when I came back around, he goes, I couldn't find him. Search and rescue was on scene literally within minutes, and they couldn't find my dad either. So realistically, he was probably hit, in the cockpit, took a hit personal. Because I've spoke to other pilots that have bailed out of their planes, of their thuds, and they said, it was just trained, and it was muscle memory that as soon as you get out, as soon as you hit the water, you deflate, you inflate your life vest, you inflate your lifeboat, and you pop your little dye canister. And if my dad didn't have the wherewithal to do that, like I said, chances are he was probably hit. But it brings me, I don't want to say it brings me joy, but it gives me peace knowing that he got out of the plane, and he went, and his graveyard was, he was buried, he had a burial at sea. And I never really understood why I've had such a connection to the ocean. I love surfing, even though I grew up in Las Vegas, but I moved out to California when I was 21. But I just always loved the water, even before then. And it was it was probably about 5 years ago. There's a student who did a wonderful video about my dad. He does videos about fallen warriors. Jason, you've seen it.
Yeah.
If you could put the link at the end, it'd be
Sure.
great. Anyway, when I was talking to him, and it just suddenly clicked. It's like, there's my dad. That's my love of the ocean. That's why, because my dad, I mean, granted, he's over on the other side of the world, but I've just always had attraction to the ocean and to the water, and that's why. So he got out of the plane. He was free. He was a free American, and the last thing he saw was the ocean underneath him, because he was several miles away from that island. So that wasn't an issue. So it was nice going to one of the, actually I've been to two, but going to the Thud pilot reunion, the combat pilots reunion, and speaking to, the pilots that flew with him, hearing the accolades from his, fellow airmen. They all said, Gene was a great stick. He was a great stick. That means a good pilot. They said he was really good at the range. And, and like I said, talking to Joe and, gosh, I forget his wingman's name, but my mom and my brother and I, we sat down, and they told us exactly what happened, that last mission. And, so, yeah.
And so, I mean, you and I talked about this last weekend. And for some families that or some Gold Star families, that the kids always struggle to know who their father was, because both you and your brother were young. And so I talked to you about another family where it was simply, the father was simply not talked about. It was just a closed book. He's not coming home. And he was not talked about. but you told me that your family was able to build you a picture of who your father was. And because that's from all the MIA families that I know, that's a huge struggle. Who was my dad? And that was what we talked about, right?
Right. Yeah. You're absolutely right that it does seem like a lot of families, it's just pushed aside, and unfortunately, my mom, being English, stiff upper lip, we never talked about it. And it was just, I was a little boy and I can remember taking the photo album and, hiding it and taking it into my room. And I'd look at, all the black and whites, all the pictures of him, the airplane, and, because I didn't want to forget what he looked like.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and mom remarried 2 years later. She met a wonderful man. He's an FBI agent. He became a judge. He's now semi-retired. They've been together 50, this will be 56 years.
Wow.
Great guy, absolutely great guy. Raised my brother and I like that we were his, When my brother and I became adults, like 22 and 24, we started going back east and seeing the Beresiks, my dad's family, and having a relationship with your uncles and your aunts as an adult. It's the best because you're no longer the little kid, the cute little kid. Oh, he's getting so big, and then they were all just, and you can talk to them, and they shared so many stories about my dad, and I got to know him in that respect. And we'd go back east and we'd have these big barbecues, and one of my most favorite things was, and this was back in the 80s. I'm a musician. I had really long hair, and we'd have these big family barbecues and get-togethers. And Webster, Massachusetts, is a very, very small town, and most of the people, they don't leave. My dad was one of the few, but people would just be staring at me across the way, and then they'd come up and they'd go with this wonderful New England accent, "You're Eugene's son." I said, "Yes." "Honest to God, you look just like your father." The third thing they'd say is, "Did anybody ever tell you the time your father buzzed Webster?" Well, apparently he'd picked up an F-105 from the Republic factory in Framingham, Long Island, and told his wingman, "Hey, I'll be right back." And he goes over to Webster and right down Main Street, treetop level.
Wow.
Blew all the windows out of, and I mean, this is a small, I mean, we're talking two lights, and and I'd always tell them, "No, I never heard that story." And they would just, "Oh, I was at O'Malley's. I was getting my oil changed. I was at the doctor's appointment." And they would, and there was just so much pride. And apparently half the town, they knew who it was. They didn't say anything. The other half was really, really angry because, he blew out all the windows. And yeah, he went straight, treetop level downtown Main Street, and then
Wow.
pitched the nose up and hit the afterburners and just boom, took off. And my mom tells me, she goes, "Yeah, your father got home and he's just like prancing around." Like, she goes, "Okay, what'd you do? What did you do, Gene?" Eugene, she called him Eugene. He goes, "Yeah, I buzzed Webster." And she's like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I buzzed Webster." She's like, "You're gonna get in trouble." He goes, No one's gonna say anything." And anyway, that's one of my favorite stories. Every time we go back east, and just, and everybody would just light up. So in that respect, my brother and I, we're very blessed that we got to know my father through my uncles and my aunts, our uncles and aunts, and through his friends that he grew up with. And we had that. And it's I understand that there's so many people that have just such a void in their life because, well, they don't know who their dad is. They don't know who their dad is. Unfortunately, people let that cripple them. And I mean, here's the thing. Our loved ones, they want us to prosper.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want us to hold their memory near and dear to them, but they don't want us to be crippled by, that loss. And I think, unfortunately, that because I've lost 2 wives now to cancer, that has given me the strength to carry on and not be crippled by that. So if anybody who's watching this, the pain is real, the grief is real. the unanswered questions, those are all real. And it's okay to have those. But like I said, do you think your father would want you to be crippled by his loss? No. I mean, he was a warrior. He would want you to go on and to live your life and to honor him, honor the sacrifice that he made, honor this country or Australia or Canada or Britain or wherever, and lead a productive life, because that's, I mean, they birthed us. They want the best for us, you know? So
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important thing. I mean, I lost my father when I was 20 and he was 45 to cancer. And over the years, I mean, it's been 35 years now. And do I miss him? Yeah, I miss him. But coming from, military, English is one side, again, the stiff upper lip. He would not want me to, sit around. But what I do appreciate is the 20 years that I had with an amazing dad,
yeah,
where some people have 80 years with a dad who's just a deadbeat, right?
right.
Now, I know that we touched on this on our private kind of chat last week. Growing up, you must have experienced a little bit of anger, as far as I'm sure there were kids at school who were saying, well, we shouldn't have been in Vietnam. And like, was it hard for you to kind of hold your tongue? I mean, I know you're not one as an adult to hold back. So
No.
as a kid, did you find yourself a little bit angry and kind of lashing out, or
I mean, I lashed out in different ways. I had some self-destructive tendencies when I turned, when I was a teenager. But
yeah.
the neighborhood where my mom bought her house that she still lives in, there were a lot of Air Force families. I mean, it was just a solid middle class, neighborhood. There were a lot of Air Force families. One of our best friends, uh, her her husband, she was an Air Force widow. Her husband was training in F-111, and in fact, his son wrote a really good book that I will send you a link for, Jason. Um, Training accident, flew an F-111 into the ground. So there was that mindset didn't, wasn't prevalent where I grew up, and which I'm very fortunate. And as far as what I found out later, like when I was a teenager, when I was a senior in high school, and I read The Passing of the Night by Robinson Reisner. He was a POW, and he described in just brutal detail exactly what they went through, those POWs went through. And then I also read Thud Ridge by
Okay,
Colonel
yeah.
Jack Broughton, which is a great book. And then Going Downtown, which was his follow-up, which talks about the court martial that he faced, is even better. But reading, that book about how like I said, well, we can bomb this, can't bomb that, can't bomb this, can't bomb that. And and then reading, there were two letters that my mom had that dad had written, and he said in one of them, he said, they were sending 10 planes up with two bombs each instead of two planes with 10 bombs, just so that McNamara could get the sorties, the mission count. And that, like I said, I was 17 years old. It was my senior in high school when I read those, came aware of those things. And that gave me a deep-seated distrust of the United States government that I still have to this day, because they're not looking out for us. They're looking out for them, And so it did, like I said, I made some really bad choices when I was younger that I'm sure probably had a lot to do with that anger, that unresolved, because my dad was gone, even though mom had remarried, and, wonderful, wonderful man who raised my brother and I. But it's like it's the ripple effect, the stone hitting the water in the
Yeah.
pond, and it just it just so and on the other hand, I mean, this was Vegas in the 70s, and it was kind of like the Wild West, so real easy to get in trouble. And we'll just leave that right there.
That's for a
So
different podcast. Yeah. On my
exactly,
on
yes,
my other channel. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Well,
exactly.
the ripple effect is something that that's why I want to get more people like yourself on, because and or even for the veterans that I know, a lot of the special forces guys, even though the war is over on paper, their war still continues,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
ripple effect still continues with you, and then with your daughter. That you've got one daughter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so she's lost out on missing your dad, right? So
Yeah.
even though that she's had an amazing grandpa, as in your stepfather, but she's still lost out, right?
Right.
So this is why this to me is important, that people realize, don't just watch a movie or read a book. You're able to put that book down and go and watch TV. But people like yourself and others, um, yeah, they can't. Now, so your father, did he have an MIA BNR status?
He was listed MIA for, I think, oh gosh, mom would know this better, but she contested it because it was like, look, he went down over water. They
Yeah,
didn't find him,
yeah,
and she had kind of just come to the grips with that right away. But they wanted to, hold him no as an MIA status. But she, within, oh my gosh, like I said, she would know this right off the top of her head. But it was changed, very quickly to KIA.
yeah. Because I suppose I should tell the public, BNR means that yes, that the man the serviceman's he is missing, but they know that he's dead. He's not alive, and they've seen him. So in this case, like you were saying, that your dad, the probability of your dad surviving that was very, very slim. And
Right.
then what I read was that while that status is still MIA, that the family are not getting paid out, right, for any insurance or something.
Right, I think so because yeah,
Yeah,
because it's in limbo, which that makes sense from an
yeah,
insurance,
yeah,
from an insurance point of view.
yeah. So during your meeting of other thud pilots or whatever, have you met other children of thud pilots who were killed?
Yes, yes,
And did
because
did
the loss rate was extremely high in in Southeast Asia, which
right?
and it had nothing to do with the plane nor the pilot nor the mission. It was the constraints
Yeah,
they fought. But there, there's a woman I met online on one of the Facebook,
yeah,
sons and daughters in touch with the Gold Star families, and she was the epitome of someone who's handicapped, and she actually, her dad flew one or two missions with my father. They were caught at the same time. Her dad went down in had a midair collision, and you know I feel bad for her, but at the same time, it's just like, your dad was a warrior.
yeah,
He wouldn't want you to, like I said, be hamstringed by this, And for the most part, I mean, the kids with my age,
yeah,
the
yeah,
adults that are
yeah,
my age that
yeah,
have lost, that lost their father. There's a huge sense of pride, because as they got older, that you realize this is what they did. This is the mission they flew. This is and there have been so much stuff has come to light, and there have been a couple of great documentaries by. He's a Navy pilot, but his father was an F-105 pilot. Mark Vizcarra did two
yeah,
Thud Tales, 1 and 2,
yeah.
and those were really good, and those described the mission, and um,
And
so yeah,
his
so
and just sorry to
oh no,
interrupt
it's
you
okay.
there, but his father, there's a very famous picture of his father after he was picked up,
Yeah,
and he's with the helicopter crew, and he's getting out, and his eyes, just the sheer terror of gets out, and that, I've talked to him. I'm not sure if he's still around it in anymore, but that picture says, tells a story there, right?
yeah. Well, the reason he was so shocked was because he ended up on a naval ship, and not on. And for an Air Force pilot, that's just the worst. But that was a harrowing experience. They, they almost, I mean, they were jettisoning, anything they could to lighten the helicopter because they were almost out of fuel. And he went down. It wasn't even a combat. I mean, he was on a combat mission, but he had a compressor stall, you know, so he hadn't even gone and flown his mission yet. So, I mean, flying jets is it's a
Yeah.
dangerous business. It's a dangerous business. My friend who, the Air Force widow that we knew, he was telling me his dad, between his dad and the instructor pilot, the F-111, they sit tandem. They had between the two of them, I think 25 hours in that jet. And they're, low level flying through this, terrain using the terrain following radar. And it's like, wow, 25 hours. I mean, you're barely even flying solo at that point. His dad had flown combat. Well, not really combat. He flew an RC 101, and so photo reconnaissance. And
Right.
I told him, I said, Mike, man, your dad had big balls. He goes, well, he didn't fly combat like yours. I go, no, my dad had guns.
Yeah.
Yours didn't. Yours only had cameras. And he kind of thought about it for a minute. He goes, yeah, you're right. He did. But it's just flying jets, man. It's dangerous business. So to get back to as far as we're adults, and if your father's siblings are still alive, I would say, reach out to them,
Yeah.
ask them questions, because they're going to love talking about, their brother. They're going to love talking about their brother, and these stories, they need to be told,
Yes.
because these are all warriors. And
Yeah.
I mean, these Vietnam warriors, they're now like the World War II
Yeah.
vets. And, and whether, we should have been there or not, okay, well, we're trying to stop the spread of communism. You know, Ideals are right. How we executed it was totally wrong. But the fact of the matter is, people volunteered.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, some of them got drafted, but they volunteered. My dad volunteered. There were a bunch of pilots that volunteered. There were a bunch of, the special forces guys. I mean, they're warriors. That's what they do,
Yeah.
and and what's that Bible quote? Who do I send? Send me, And there's just it's a warrior mentality, and their stories they need to be told, and they need to be kept alive.
Yeah, and that's why, it's so cool that people like yourself are open to do these kind of, chats, and so the memory, I mean, and with the young man that did the video on your dad, I mean, that's great. So then even after you and I are gone, that video will still be on something, right?
Right,
And it will
right,
live on. So that's kind of my objective with the books that I do as well.
absolutely.
And originally, it was only going to be special forces guys that I would chat to. And then I thought, well, there's so many other people out there with interesting stories. And some are sad, like yours. But again, I mean, one family is a SOG, soldier, and they were being overrun. And there was a plane coming in to drop bombs. And he said, drop them right on me. And they said, what? Drop them right on me. I'm hit. I'm not gonna make it, and they're right here. Um, and so they did, and they never found him. And so I asked the family if they would be willing to write a story about their father, about the experiences that happened. And the eldest brother, he wrote 3 or 4 pages about how the two army officers knocked on the door, told the mother, and the mother screamed, and yeah, and just how everything fell apart, you know, um, from hearing that news, right? So, those are stories that need to be told. And it's not, that's what kind of bothers me a little bit about the internet is there's so many, this warrior did this warrior did that. But like I said, they don't know the families like you or like my other friends, right? It's not cool for them, right? And I'm sure that many things have triggered them over the years. But yeah, so again, good or bad, stories should be told, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
um,
You mentioned my daughter not
right.
knowing her grandfather, which is true, but we were fortunate enough that the first time we went back east was in 2001, and she was 4. And then we started going, every spring break, we'd go to Boston and saw all of Massachusetts. And so she got to know, you know, my dad's
Oh, that's
siblings.
cool.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And in fact, my granddaughter, she calls me Gazda, which is Slovak for the boss,
Oh,
because
really?
when
Wow.
when my uncle, the last remaining boy, he was his sisters called him the Gazda. And so it's like, oh, okay, I kind of like that. And I forgot all about it. But yeah, Claire was like, yeah, Dad, Cora's gonna call you Gazda. And I was like, oh, okay, I like that. I like that.
Now,
So
as we kind of wind this down today, um, uh, without mentioning his name, your stepfather, I think that's kind of neat that what he was able to achieve. And if you don't want to mention this on here, that's fine. I'm not going to put you into a spot.
no, no,
But
no, go ahead. Ask
he
away.
he during his time in the FBI, he took a stance against a certain group of very racist people.
Yes, yes, he did.
So that is kind of what I'm wondering as we kind of spin this down here. Whatever you're comfortable with saying about that, I think that really tells what kind of man that your stepfather is.
Okay. What do you want to know?
Well,
What he
just
was
that,
doing?
yeah. I mean, when so basically, if it seems to me that you are comfortable with this. He took down a clan or like so I'm kind of being cautious here.
Okay, the FBI was they were investigating all the civil rights violations because that's federal crime. And he was stationed. He was in New York, and apparently the KKK had murdered. They shot. He was a high-ranking. I think he was an Army Reserve officer. They thought he was a civil rights worker. Well, J. Edgar Hoover, you get 100 men down there. Well, we can only muster up about 70. So they go down, and they were in Biloxi, Mississippi, and the
Oh, wow.
Mississippi burning case was already ongoing, and they had already made headway. So my dad didn't work on that, but they investigated all the church bombings, all the civil rights violations, and I mean, just everything that was going on down south. And it was bad. It was bad. It was there were a bunch of bad people doing a bunch of bad stuff. And unfortunately, they would go pick someone up for questioning. Well, I was with 20 of my friends playing poker that night. And sure enough, 20 of his friends are going to say, yeah. So, you got an alibi. What are they going to do? So, my dad, the feds, they would harass the Klan members because they knew who they were,
Right.
and a lot of them were law enforcement. But he told my brother and I once, he goes, yeah, we'd drive by the houses and we'd shoot shotguns at the houses. I'm like, oh my gosh, Dad, you guys are firing shotgun blasts like you're doing a drive-by shooting? He goes, yeah. And I go, well, he goes, who are they going to call? The police? you know? So it was just a case to let them know that we know. We know what you're up to. And we're gonna put the screws any way we can. Because, herein lies the issue that, are you gonna fight fair? They're not fighting fair.
Yeah.
So they did what they could. They did whatever it took, and bust up a bunch of illegal gambling rings. And like I said, a lot of it was all the civil rights violations. So the FBI. This was, and I'm not going to get too much into this,
Yeah.
but I will say how things were years ago.
Yeah.
My dad made the comment. He goes, that's not the FBI that I worked for.
Today.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
well, today they're getting back to what they're doing, what they should be doing. But there was a period of time where where they weren't. And and that was, I mean, J. Edgar Hoover was hated by a lot of people, but he ran that completely separately, and he didn't answer to anybody. He didn't answer to the president. He didn't answer to Congress, which good or bad. I mean, that there was nobody pulling, playing him like a puppet. So
The man who had files on everybody,
yeah,
and their about their kinks and that kind of
everything.
stuff. Only to find out that he himself was indulging in wearing women's
Right,
clothes.
right.
But that maybe he was trying to find a deal to find somebody who was, in the same club.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think for today that we'll leave that. Leave that. I really appreciate you sharing some of the more personal things about your dad. I really enjoyed the him doing the flyby, like, in the Top Gun movie. I'm gonna buzz the bridge. No, you're not. So I really enjoy. Those are the stories that I think are best held. I mean, we can respect what your dad did, but him going off off tangent to say I'll be back in a minute. That shows what that he had kind of a cheeky, personality where I'm going to have some fun
Yes.
with this, right? So
Yes.
I appreciate that you sharing that and telling us a little bit about who your stepdad was and is. And as we conclude this, I will say that I have met Paul, and when I was down in California, and Paul was nice enough to give me a Japanese flag that was hanging on your father's wall, right? So yes, I still have that.
Good. Good. Good.
So for today, Paul, I will say thank you very much, sir, for being on here, and I will add a link. I,
Absolutely.
I will add a link to that young man's video.
Perfect.